Okay, so now that we have our HTML done, we're going to jump into our CSS. And I'm assuming you have some basic knowledge in CSS. We're not going to do anything crazy in most of the projects. We do have some animation and some effects that we're going to do in some of them, but for the most part, it's pretty basic. We'll be using Flexbox. We'll be using the grid in just a couple projects, but you should definitely know at least the basics of CSS. So the first thing I want to do is bring in a font. I'm actually going to use a font from Google. So I'm going to open up a new tab here. And by the way, this that you're seeing here is from an extension, a Chrome extension called Moment, in case you were wondering. Now I'm going to go to fonts.google.com and just grab Open Sans. So right here, I'll just click the plus sign. And I know most of you guys know how to do this stuff, but I want to just explain even the simplest things for people that don't know this. So we can either take the link and put it in our HTML or the import and put it in our CSS, which is what I'm going to do. So we'll copy that and we'll go ahead and paste that in. All right, and we can hit Command B and close that sidebar if we need. So after we do that, I'm going to add on everything. So I'm going to use an asterisk here, and I'm going to add a box sizing property and set that to border box. And I do that with all my projects because I don't want any padding to affect the width of the element. So we just want to use border box on everything. And then on the body, let's add a background color. We're going to add a gray color here. So hexadecimal F9 FAFB. It's going to be the color. And then we'll apply our font. So font family is going to be Open Sans, Sans Serif. Okay, and then in a lot of the projects, we're just going to set the display value to flex, which will make everything that is all the direct children of the body will be a flex item. Now in this case, we only have one direct child, which is this div of container. And the reason I'm doing display flex is so we can easily put this stuff right in the middle, both vertically and horizontally. And we can do that with align item center and justify content center. Now, if we want to get it centered vertically as well, then we have to add a height or a min height of 100 VH. Okay, VH is a viewport height unit. So basically, with a viewport height, you can think of the browser having 100 slices going this way. And we just set the height to all 100, so it takes up the whole thing here. If I set this to 50 viewport heights, then it's only going to take up 50 of those slices, but we want it to take up 100. And by using align items center and justify content center, it's going to center it both horizontally and vertically. And then we'll just take any margin away. So this is going to be really common, this right here, for a lot of our projects, just because we want to center everything in the UI. So next we have the container. So the container wraps around everything, and we're going to add a background color of white for the container. And then let's add a border radius. So I'm going to add some rounded corners here. We'll do 5 pixels. And let's add a little bit of a box shadow. So the values I'm going to use is 0, 2 pixels, 10 pixel blur, and then the color I'm going to use RGBA, which is red, green, blue, alpha. We'll do 0 for red, green, blue, and then the alpha 0.3, which is basically like the transparency. So that just gives it this drop shadow around it. So I'm also going to set the width of the container. I'm going to set it to 400 pixels, and then I'm going to set, actually, I think that's it. So that's it for the container. The padding I'm actually going to put on the form itself. So remember, we have a class of form, and let's add padding. So we'll do 30 pixels top and bottom padding, and then 40 pixels left and right padding. Okay, so it gives us this space on the sides and on the top and bottom. And then for the H2, I just want to add a couple styles there. I want to center it. So I'm going to use text, align, center. That'll center it. And then margin, I'm just going to do 0, 0, 20 on the bottom, like that. Okay, so now we want to do each input, or I should say form control, because form control includes the label, the input, and the small tag with the error message. So let's say form control. We'll set a margin bottom of 10 pixels. Let's do a padding bottom of 20 pixels. And we want to position this relative because we're going to be positioning the small tag, the error message, absolute within the form control. So if you want to position something absolute within another element, that parent element has to be relative. And I know, again, I know a lot of you guys know this stuff, but I'm just explaining it for people that don't. So let's do the labels. So form control label. So for this, we're going to set the color to 777, and labels are display inline by default. So I'm going to display block. That way they go on their own line and they knock the next element down. And then I'm also going to add a margin bottom of 5 pixels. Okay, so next we have the inputs. So let's say form control input. Let's set a border of 2 pixel solid, and we'll do hexadecimal F0, F0, F0. Okay, lighten up that border. Let's give it a border radius of 4 pixels, and let's display block so that it's on its own line. And then let's set the width. I want the width to be 100% of its container, so it stretches all the way across. And then padding on the inputs, we'll do 10 pixels, and let's set the font size to 14 pixels. Okay, so make those inputs look nice and neat. Now I want to get rid of the outline, so that actually happens in the focus state. So if we do form control input colon focus, I'm going to set the outline to 0, and if I do that, you can see there's no outline, but I do want to at least have a border color here, a different border color. So we'll go ahead and change that to 777, so that way when we click in here, at least it has that darker border. Okay, and of course you don't have to do that, but now we're going to have different states for the inputs. So if there's an error, I want the border to be red, and if it's successful, I want it to be green. So let's go ahead and say form control, and if it has a class of success, so if the form control div also has a class of success, then we want the input to have a border color of hexadecimal value 2ECC71, which is going to be a green. Okay, if it's successful, we want it to be green. Now, if there's an error, let's just grab that. So let's change success. So if it has a class of error, then we want the input to have a border of red. So this is going to be E74C3C, which is like an orangey reddish color. Now, if I were to go to the HTML and manually add to this form control success, and then let's go to the next one and add error, you'll see that we get a green and a red outline. Now, obviously, we don't want to manually add these. It's going to happen dynamically within the JavaScript later on, but we do need these classes for those colors to show. Now, for the small tag, let's say form control small, which is where the error message is, we're going to have that color. We're going to make this the same color as this. In fact, you know what we could do is we could create CSS custom properties, which are basically variables in CSS. So I wasn't going to do this, but I think it might be a good opportunity to. So we need to define a scope. So we do :root, meaning the root scope, so we can use these variables anywhere. And then the way we assign variables is -- or create variables. So we have to do a -- and let's do success -color. Okay, and I'll put that in a second, and then we'll have error -color. And then I'm just going to grab this this hexadecimal right here, put that in the success, and then we'll grab this and put that in the error. Okay, so now we have these variables that we can use. So instead of doing this, the way that we use the variables is with the var keyword and then some parentheses, and then we can put in, this is going to be success color, and then this is going to be error color, and we'll just grab that, put that here as well, and save. Okay, and you can see that these now are the error color. And if you want to change these colors, you can just change them right here, and it'll iterate throughout the CSS file and change it wherever you have these variables. Okay, so let's continue on with the small tag with the errors. So I want to position this absolute within the form control, and we're going to put this from the bottom 0 and from left 0. And initially we want these to be hidden because we don't want to show error messages for no reason. We need to wait until we actually something happens. So we're going to set visibility to hidden. So I save that. You can see that those error messages are now gone. Now there's a difference between visibility hidden and display none. And I go over this in my HTML and CSS course. I go over all this stuff. But basically, display none will collapse anything around it. Visibility hidden just simply makes it invisible. And that's what we want to do here. So let's save that. And then what we'll do is in the JavaScript, when something goes wrong, we're going to add the error class. And then we want to set the visibility back to visible. So let's say form control, and if it has an error class on it, then we want the small tag, and we want to set the visibility to visible. And then the last thing I want to style is the button here. So let's say form button, and we want to just make sure the cursor is a pointer when we hover over it. We're going to set the background color to hexadecimal. Let's do 3498 dB, and I'm gonna create a border. So let's do border 2 pixels solid, and I'm actually gonna copy that as well. And then we're gonna add a border radius, and let's do 4 pixels. Let's set the color to white. Okay, you can see what that looks like so far. Let's make this display block, and let's add a font size here of 16 pixels. Okay, and then we want some padding, so we'll do 10 pixels padding, and let's just add a margin top of 20 pixels, and I also want it to extend all the way across, so I'm going to set a width of 100%. Okay, so that looks pretty cool. I mean, it's simple, but it's modern. It's nice and clean. So in the next video, we're going to go ahead and start the fun part, which is the JavaScript, which is the logic. All right, so we will continue in the next one.